Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
So, I am getting married. Woo! October 18th, just 25 days from now. I don't know whose idea that was to pick that date right after Yom Kippur, but here we are. It's going to happen right on this very bima, and I know some of you share that date. So, Mazel Tov to Melissa and Dave, Ethan and Lila, Kendra and Ronen. You're keeping your rabbis busy. It's going to be great. I have to tell you, obviously, I'm thrilled that I get to marry my awesome fiance, David. And I'm also a little nervous, because even as a rabbi who works with a lot of couples, it turns out there are still some relationship skills that I felt the need to, let's say, tune up a little bit before I commit for life. So as our wedding has drawn closer, in the past year, I've picked up a few books about strengthening relationships. And at the same time that I've been trying to prepare myself for marriage, the Jewish people have been going through some relationship issues of our own on a larger scale. I don't have to tell most of you that this has been one of the most divisive times for the Jewish people in our living memory. So once again, I picked up a few books. This time about combating polarization, talking across a difference. And the funny thing I found, and this is true, was that the books about polarization and strengthening our communities across division kept quoting the books about marriage. And this makes sense, because if we can develop skills for what to do when somebody we love does or says something that upsets us, whether it's our partner or our child or our parent or friend, we can use those very same skills with our coworkers, our neighbors, our entire world. But over the last few decades, our culture has devalued and downgraded these skills. Pew Research compares how our attitudes in America has changed since the 1990s. And I think that this research speaks directly to us as a Jewish community. The research says, unsurprisingly, we're feeling much colder and more contemptuous to anyone perceived to be on the other side than ever before. We've also become more simplistic in our views. We care more about who is telling us information than the information itself. And finally, and I think most importantly, we are devoting much more energy into finding a sense of comfort and a sense of belonging than we are into seeking accurate information. So we're prioritizing comfort and belonging over accurate information. And some of you might ask, what's the point? We have been talking about polarization for years. What's the point when we are in a national emergency? When innocent people are being swept off the streets by masked ICE agents who seek to intimidate through force? When anti-Semitism is on the rise, and we're really feeling it in our own lives? When we're in a crisis as a people? When one Israeli leader and thinker after the other cries out that this war has gone way too far, but the Israeli government shows no interest in stopping, why are we still talking about polarization? I think the point is, yes, we have known about polarization for years. But if we're being honest, we haven't done that much about it. We haven't actually changed our own behavior. We haven't learned how to communicate with people whose ideas make us really uncomfortable. I want to be clear, when I say people, I'm not talking about politicians or political commentators or public figures. I'm talking about the people in the row 3 seats down from you. The ones whose beliefs you totally and completely disagree with and frankly find offensive and appalling. I'm talking about those of us who have children or parents where it's like, we don't even know where they came from. They think so differently than us. I'm talking about those of us who have coworkers or cousins or friends who keep posting things on social media that we find disturbing, unfair, untrue. And those WhatsApp groups that I know I'm in and I know some of you are in, that are so nice on some days and on other days devolve over and over again. Polarization is no longer happening between us and a theoretical group of people on the other side of the country. It's happening to us, in our own lives, with people we love. So here's a glimpse of what I've heard from all of you in this last year. Rabbi, I just want this congregation to be a safe haven for people who love Israel. There is so much hate in this world towards Israel. Can this not just be the one place where we don't have to experience that criticism and that hate? Rabbi, I am so embarrassed and ashamed of Israel's actions that I have stopped telling people that I am Jewish. Rabbi, I have to tell you, I cannot listen to the mainstream news anymore. The New York Times, NPR, they're so biased in their coverage of Israel, I have ended, after years, all of my subscriptions. And finally, Rabbi, I'm not sure I belong in this congregation anymore. I have considered leaving multiple times because you are not condemning Israel vocally from the pulpit enough. Rabbi, I'm not sure I belong in this congregation anymore, and I have considered leaving multiple times because you are not supporting Israel from this pulpit enough. There are Jews in this room who believe that the ideology of other Jews in this room is misinformed, hateful, and potentially even dangerous. At Emanu-El, probably because of the intensity of these feelings, we've avoided having some of these difficult conversations with one another. But I believe this Rosh HaShanah, as we enter into 5786, we are staring down at the unraveling of the wider Jewish community over our differences. This unraveling has begun, but it's not complete. And so we here at Emanu-El, we have a decision to make. Are we going to fall into this trap of division? Are we going to allow our Judaism to be defined only by people we agree with? Or could we create something different? Could we be a community that confronts these fissures head on in a way that I believe almost nobody in the Jewish world and very few people in the entire world are willing to do right now? And why would we do this extraordinarily difficult work right now, when we feel more scared and more angry and somehow more tired than ever? I believe we need to figure out how to stick together as a community, because our ability to have those difficult conversations, to get uncomfortable, and still be able to pray together, to eat together, to gather together as one community, that is our best resource. That is our best resource in the fight against extremism and hatred and division. And when we actually learn how to talk to one another, we are going to find that we have major perception gaps. It turns out that we tend to think that people who disagree with us hold far more extreme beliefs than they actually do. And it also turns out that people who disagree with us, we think that their opinions are immovable and unchangeable, and that has also been proven false. If we want the world to be a better place for us, for future generations, if we want less division, if we want less violence, we have to start practicing the skills it takes to create that world right here at Emanu-El. But it's really, really hard. I can already tell it's going to be hard. I see some of you nodding at me and some of you being like, oh my God, what is she going to say? We love the idea that disagreement sits at the heart of what it means to be Jewish. And Dr. Yehuda Kurtzer of the Hartman Institute of Jerusalem, who just spoke here last week, he said this so well. He said, we love to say 2 Jews, 3 opinions. But how often do we actually embrace that as an ethos? Do we model it? And then he said, American Jews get really good at pluralism on topics we don't care about. But 2 Jews, 3 opinions is not just a cute saying. And I forgot until Rabbi Westreich reminded me just how far our rabbis take this idea. The Talmud tells us there is chevruta or there is metuta. There is chevruta. Chevruta is that friend, that community member that we study together with and we learn together with. And inherent in that learning and that studying is deep disagreement, is the ability to work out differences with those who are close to us. So there's either chevruta, there's learning how to work out our differences together, or there is metuta, there is death. I don't believe that we at Emanu-El, thankfully, thank God, are on the verge of killing one another. But I do think it's time for us to create something to open ourselves up to something new and different. Doing so might feel impossible, but the first step we need to take, the antidote to this problem, is believing that change is possible. And after a year spent learning from you, this kind, this truly bold, innovative congregation, I believe that change is possible. We are the Jewish people, and therefore we believe that anyone can change, that the world can change. This whole season is about teshuvah. It's all about our belief in our ability to change as human beings and repair our relationships. So how are we going to work to create that transformative change here? We are going to sit around the same tables, and we're going to practice new ways of listening to one another. And these practices of listening, they are going to change our lives. Because if we can practice sitting here with people whose ideas we find abhorrent, if we can hear each other's fears and hopes and have ours be heard as well, not because we're going to agree with one another, not because we're totally going to change each other's minds, but because if we take the time to do so, we are going to see God in one another. And we're going to have the skills to be peacemakers in this world. And we're a pretty big congregation. So if Emanu-El builds, for lack of a better word, an army of peacemakers, Not only will these skills ripple through how we interact with our partners, our friends, our children's teachers, they will ripple through our city and our world. Throughout the year, we're going to do this with an incredible organization. I swear to God, you have to be there. It's called Resetting the Table. And Resetting the Table brings researched-backed methods to turn those conversations and interactions that we find dreadful, like when Israel comes up at the dinner party, or when our kids' teacher is teaching something we don't like, or somebody that we love posts something we hate on social media, those interactions that make us go like this. Resetting the Table is going to help us learn how to turn those interactions into transformative encounters. We're going to take those skills and we're going to apply them. We're going to ask you to join us throughout the year to study texts from all over the political spectrum. Texts that inspire us, texts that make us really uncomfortable, because that is what Jews have been doing for thousands of years. Now, of course, this work isn't going to be easy, and of course, there are lines. These conversations are for people who care about the flourishing of Jews and Judaism. And these conversations are for people who care about the flourishing of humanity. But I have to tell you something that's going to seem disappointingly mild to some of you and appalling to others. There are people in this congregation and in this wider community who are deeply committed to Judaism and Jewish flourishing, who are proud Zionists. And there are people in this congregation and in this wider community who are deeply committed to Jewish flourishing, who do not identify as Zionist. There are people who believe that Israel has no choice but to fight this war the way they are fighting it. And there are people who believe beyond the shadow of a doubt that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. We can vehemently disagree on what those words mean, but we can't keep avoiding these conversations. We can't keep plugging our ears and pretending that there aren't kind, smart, well-informed Jewish people who feel the opposite way that we do. No matter who we are or how we are feeling, those of us who love Israel so deeply, those of us who are so angry, those of us who feel both ways, we cannot shut our fellow Jews and community members out of our conversations. We need the congregant who says, I want this to be a safe haven for those who love Israel, and the congregant who says, I don't know if I belong here because I'm so angry at Israel. We need the two of you, all of you, to sit together, to try and hear one another, to see each other's humanity. That kind of change, that might feel like a really big ask. But we've seen it happen in this world. I had the honor earlier this year of getting to travel to South Africa with a delegation of Jewish leaders. And on that trip, we visited Robben Island. This is the island 4 miles off the coast of Cape Town, where Nelson Mandela was held as a prisoner for 18 years. And we were given a tour of that prison by a man named Kagotsu, who had been held there himself as a political prisoner for 6 years in his 20s because he fought against apartheid. Now I want you to imagine for a moment, as a 20-year-old, being held in a tiny freezing cell, sleeping on the floor, being forced to carry heavy rocks back and forth all day long for no reason other than the fact that you helped organize a protest. Who would you become? I asked our guide if he carries a lot of anger towards his country and fellow citizens. And he said, I don't have 1 single ounce of revenge in my heart. I had to stop the cycle for the freedom of my people. And then he looked at our group, knowing who we were, and he said, it's the same with the Israelis and Palestinians. One kills one man's son, then his father kills another man's son. It will never stop unless they are willing to stop the cycle. Next, somehow, we met Nelson Mandela's prison warden, who had been a young man placed in charge of watching over Nelson Mandela's cell. And Nelson Mandela had actually befriended him. And he had done this with a number of his prison wardens. He had not only befriended this prison warden, when he was finally freed from prison, he paid for the warden's son to go to school. And eventually, the warden's son worked to turn that prison into an educational site. We have no idea what kind of change is possible in our world. We have no idea what kind of change is possible in our world. But it's our job as Jews to relentlessly pursue that change. We need you to do that right here. Whoever you are, however you are feeling. If you have ever wondered if this is the spiritual home for you, we need you here. We need you to come back. The project of building peace in our world starts right here at Emanu-El. Shana Tova.